Hi, I'm Donnie Kemick with Protocol 80. I'm here joined by Josh Curcio, Protocol 80, who had the pleasure of speaking this year at Fabtech 2019. So we're going to run through some major themes of Fabtech this year and just get a general sense of how the show went and some key takeaways. So Josh, just general sentiment, how did you feel the show was this year?
I thought it was great. People seemed to be really excited, especially because it was back in Chicago. Last year it was in Atlanta, but they love being like right near the Rust Belt, right near like the heart of America's manufacturing. So I think people were super excited. They love it when it's in Chicago, other than the weather.
Yeah, right. I think you actually had a little potential trouble with flights and stuff.
I was okay because I flew in Sunday, but the first day of the show, there were like 600 flights or something that were canceled because of the weather. So, I mean,
that is crazy.
Yeah.
And so did you notice, I mean, it's such a huge show, but did you notice attendance lower on
I
the
didn't
first day?
notice other than talking to people. So I spoke that morning, so I spent some time up in the education area there and then speaking with some of the other people that I spoke with that morning. Then once I did get down to the floor, there was some people talking about that. That's, I guess, brings up a good point. Like trade shows can be impacted easily by the weather, especially when in a place like Chicago.
Right, yeah, absolutely. So if you are, which is actually a great point, if you're heavily dependent on shows for lead generation or, sales outreach, something you got to consider as a potential risk of a return, especially if you're dropping buku bucks for a show like
for sure.
Fabtech.
For sure.
So shifting gears a little bit, what were some of like the new themes this year that you saw exhibited, and what were some of the exciting aspects?
So I think this was my third year speaking, and each year I see an increased growth in like the focus on smart manufacturing, which I think is really cool. There's a lot of advancements that smart manufacturing will give manufacturers, but it's also like in the long run, it's going to give us, much better products, hopefully even cheaper products, because some of that smart manufacturing will help manufacturers produce products better, more efficiently, more effectively, allows for us to be able to compete maybe globally with other manufacturers that may be producing something, China or wherever that may be. I just think it's awesome, and it's cool to see the different types of integrations that these different vendors are having to support the manufacturing world. Making it smarter, Industry 4.0. It's cool.
That's awesome. And I kind of wonder if that will actually help some of the skills gap challenges happening, because you've got this kind of modern technology and things going into smart manufacturing. It might be a way to get some younger folks, at least putting their eye into manufacturing, which maybe brings us to the next point. It seems like the skills gap is a constant issue in manufacturing.
Still a struggle.
So was there much content around that, or lots of vendors?
Yeah, there was a lot of talk around that. We need to hire welders, we need to hire machinists, we're having trouble finding them. There is a lot of discussion around that, and that skills gap is only getting worse over the next several years as baby boomers are retiring. I guess the positive side of things that I've heard on that is that a lot of these regions around these manufacturing companies are doing things to help close that gap. Maybe a little bit too late to like meet it head on, but they are finding different programs that they can use in the high school level to get students engaged in manufacturing earlier. And there's a lot of grant programs and things to help fund that, or even local manufacturing organizations funding that themselves, because they understand how important it is to get that workforce coming up into the manufacturing space.
Right. Well, that's good to hear. There's definitely government support for it, and spot on with, we even have plenty of local organizations in our area that are heavily pushing, getting it integrated with the STEM programs and things in schools. So we do trade show marketing, so I'm dying to know how some of the booths were, and maybe some of the activities that the booths had that might have stood out relative to other ones.
Yeah, I mean, Fabtech, if you've never been there, it's like a crazy place, because you've got like robotic welders, you've got laser cutters, you've got all these things all over the place. It's almost like a little overwhelming at first. A lot of the booths just look awesome. I think that there's still some disconnect. So when I look at some of these booths and then I get back to the office and I'm able to check out the websites, I'm like, really? Like, you have that awesome booth and this is how you present yourself online? It just, sometimes I don't grasp how, you know, the thought process goes into, we need to display ourselves here in this manner, but, maybe this manner isn't quite as important. It's still a little shocking to me that the digital space is so far behind.
So they put up a really good front at the show.
Which happens once, twice, 3 times
Right.
a year, depending on, their show involvement.
So the obvious impact is they generate leads or have, potential sales conversations there. Those leads go back to their office and say, hey, this booth was awesome. It was great, to meet these people that might be able to help us. And then they hop on their 2005 website and it's maybe
it's scary. On the I guess along with that, some of the other things that you look at is like, how much time and finances people are investing into these trade shows. And you still have a lot of people that sit back there and wait for someone to initiate the conversation. I feel bad for the companies that are paying for these booths to be there. And, I don't know that they do that necessarily all day long, every day, but even on the first day, early in the day, you have people that are sitting there. It's sad to see. But then on the flip side, you've got some people that really know how to work the booth, really know how to strike up conversations with absolutely everyone. And not only that, but they're good conversations. They're not like, hey, check out like what we're doing here in this booth or whatever at our company. It's asking questions to make the conversation happen. And I think that's what's really important.
That's awesome. So as we like to say, model what works. So if you are doing trade shows and you're passively sitting in your booth versus, proactively trying to engage in conversations, you gotta change that around. And if you're not the person to do that, you got to get other people to man your booth that are willing to be outgoing. So did you have any conversations with companies to just kind of discuss what the impact of this show is for them financially and in their sales?
Yeah, I did. That's one of the questions that I would ask a lot, as I was walking around and talking to people, and it's a mixed bag. You've got some that know that they're generating leads and that it's probably working for them, but at the end of the day, they don't have a great system to be able to track back and say, I know exactly what revenue this drove and whether it even makes sense for us to continue to do this show. There's still that disconnect there. There are surprisingly still people that are saying, we just have to be here. Our competitors are here, and people would question if we weren't, whether we still were in business or not, which has me thinking, let's say you were very active on digital, doing, content writing or being active in social media, where you became almost that thought leader online, there wouldn't still be that question.
Right. It wouldn't be necessary to invest so heavily in a show like Fabtech. And, the other thing I think that gets missed a lot of times is your web presence is technically your trade show all year round, 24 hours a day.
Not impacted by the weather.
Not impacted by the weather, and not nearly as risky as investing so heavily in a couple of shows that your sales funnel really depend on. So it's an interesting point. So things are kind of really uncertain for 2020, especially with the political environment. So was that discussed at all?
It was. 2020, that was something that people were talking about, being so close to the end of the year, being in planning season. One thing people were excited about is that Fabtech's going to be in Las Vegas next year. So not necessarily close to the Rust Belt, but close to, or being in Las Vegas, right? So they're excited about that. But then the uncertainty factor, it's an election year. Nobody knows what's going to be happening in 2020 with the presidential elections here in the U.S., which leads to some uncertainty in like how their sales will be, or how do they plan for that uncertainty. So lots of discussion around that.
Okay. Anyone indicate whether or not that would impact shows next year, more marketing to try and get ahead of potential, downturns in the economy and things?
Yeah, a little bit. I think that for the time being, the general manufacturing mindset has how it's always been is like, well, let's just try things and we'll see what happens, which is sad.
Right. It's a little scary.
But that just tends to be, let's play it out. I think that when you think about the uncertainty and next year, and how people are going to be spending and making their buying decisions. That leads me to believe that more people are going to be going online to try to find either verification that the way they're doing things is the right way to be doing them. They're spending in the right manner. They've got the right vendors, or maybe they need to be out searching for alternatives just in case. I think that uncertainty, regardless of how the election turns out, is going to be more favorable for those manufacturers that are doing something online and understand
For sure. For sure. I think you touched on a great point there. Even if you have like an awesome, stable base of customers, when depending on risks in the economy and manufacturing buying habits and how they're impacted, even if you have 10 or 12 or 20 great customers that always buy from you and they're happy, they're probably still going to dip their toe in the water a little bit just for that validation to say, yep, I'm still definitely with the best provider, especially as the potential purse strings tighten a little bit.
Yep.
And they're looking to save some money. So I know you met a ton of people at Fabtech. Any booths or people stand out?
I brought a couple cards because I came back with like a stack this big. It's really cool to go to Chicago, go to Fabtech, and meet some local people. So, I met Jude Ahman from Lundstrom in Wellsville, which is about 30 minutes from us.
Yeah.
Didn't expect to meet someone from Wellsville there.
Right.
They had a nice booth, very outgoing, and they were a group of people where they actually did come out and talk. I didn't have to find them. They found me and just found out we were kind of neighbors.
Awesome.
Erie's magnetic company out of Erie, PA. Their booth stood out because it's bright orange. They had a nice presentation and good set of people there talking to everyone. So I stopped by there just because I knew of Erie's being, just down the road from us. Buffalo Shrink Wrap. I didn't know Buffalo Shrink Wrap, but they're in Clarence, New York. Semi-local to us here.
Yeah.
Great conversation with Bill and his wife there at Buffalo Shrink Wrap. A couple of the other standouts. I talked to Nate at Stronghold. These Stronghold cabinets are awesome. They're like industrial grade cabinets where you can have anything you want printed on them. So at the show, they had like some standard, color ones where a manufacturer could brand it to their brand, right? But then they had this one that had the American flag on it, and it just looked awesome. And you could tell like something like that would go over really well at a manufacturing show. And these things look like you could drop them off a cliff and they would still have everything, intact.
Awesome.
I guess the last ones I kind of want to point out are the two gentlemen from EDSI that I spoke with earlier in the morning, Ken Mall and Chuck Moraine. They talked about networking at a trade show, and when you're there and when you're talking to people, make it really about them. Don't try to sell them on the spot, because unless they're like ready to sign something, that's not going to happen. The time you're going to sell to them is going to be after you've built the relationship, had more conversations. So their whole training session was all about how to do that networking, and I thought it went over really well. They work in the manufacturing space all the time. Talk to all of them and understand that kind of longer buying process. So it was good for the other manufacturers in the room to hear that and not be constantly trying to sell, but instead listen, find out what the problems are and what needs solved, and then make it a conversation, and then you can solve later on.
Which I would imagine then they're encouraging manufacturers to do kind of what we do as well with the whole inbound process, because it's all about helping and being there to answer the question, and so that when they are ready to make the buying decision, you're the thought leader, you're the top of mind resource. Awesome. Well, this has been a great discussion about Fabtech. Any last things you want to add?
No, great show. Really appreciate the support that the Fabtech team and the SME team provide. Appreciate having us there each year. It's been, even a learning experience for me to be able to talk to all those people and see these different things that I'm not kind of ingrained with every day. So just really appreciate everything that they're able to do and support.
Awesome. Well, if you have trade show plans for 2020, we're going to link some resources below. And, if you still have questions about your shows that are upcoming, or even want some evaluation of the shows that you did this year, feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to have a conversation with you.
Yeah. The other thing that we're kind of in the midst of is planning for online. So if trade shows isn't necessarily where you're looking to be, we'd be happy to have a discussion with anyone about what it might look like in 2020 as it relates to inbound.
For sure. Awesome. Well, thank you.